Well, good afternoon. My name is Steve Tregay. I'm chairman of the board of LabCentral and managing director of Mission BioCapital. It's my great pleasure to bring you to the next installment of our webinar, Innovation in Biotech in the Time of COVID-19. Today is actually one of our favorite topics, which is the stories of startups, and bringing us back to what we love to do and think about is creating great companies and how our ecosystem really can change the world. And so today we've got a great set of panelists with us to really help us work through this and share their stories. And so we'll jump right in. Let me introduce myself first, and then I'll actually turn it over to each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll get started. So just as a reminder, we'll do some back and forth with us as the panelists, and then we're always open to Q&A. So please make sure you get your questions in, and we'll try to get to as many as we can towards the end of the period. So yeah, if I give everyone my background, again, my name's Steve Tregay. I did my graduate work at Harvard in organic chemistry. I moved into business development at Array Biopharma before moving to Novartis, which brought me back to Cambridge, working in NIBR when it was first getting started. I covered a lot of the business development areas, oncology, ophthalmology, and all of their technology areas. I then went on to become one of the founding managing directors for one of the Novartis venture funds. And that's where I founded Therapeutics. So as a first-time CEO, I moved over there. Now, interestingly, that seems like a long time ago, but that was in the 08-09 crisis. So it's always interesting to build companies in those kind of timeframes. I ran Forma for over 10 years. Before transitioning that to Frank Lee, who then went on to take the company public just recently. So happy to share some of my aspects of my story. As I mentioned earlier, I've been involved with LabCentral from the very beginning, which is great to see how this has really enabled entrepreneurs, and I'm now chairman of the board. And then my day job is as now getting back to venture and company creation as managing director of Mission BioCapital. So enough about me, and let's turn it over to our great panelists. So maybe we could start with Jessica, and she could give us her background.
Of course. Yeah, thank you, Steve. It's such an honor to be on this panel. So my name is Jessica Sun. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cure Health. So we develop automated and digital platforms that enable rapid diagnosis and biomarker innovation. So a little bit about myself, and I have a shorter version and the longer version. So the shorter version is, I was trained as a cancer biologist and working on genomics and proteomics. And in the past 10 or 15 years, I've been moving back and forth between academia and industry. So I did my PhD at University of Washington for Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle. And then I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area and working at Genentech for a few years. And then I moved to Cambridge and spent a couple of years at Harvard. And after that, we started Cure Health. And I guess my longer version will be actually, why I did this, back and forth. But I think I'll probably save that later after we hear panelist's introduction. Thank you.
Great, thanks you, Jessica. Laura, how about telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sure. So I'm Laura Indolfi. I'm founder and CEO of PanTher Therapeutics. In my first life, I got trained as a biomedical engineer in Italy. I did my undergrad and grad there, studying also a little bit in France during my PhD studies. And I've always been focused on translational science. So both my undergrad and grad theses, they were all on products that then could be translated into the clinic. And after my PhD, I moved to Boston in 2008 for a postdoc at MIT. And I took that opportunity not only to grow on the scientific side, but also to learn more on how to commercialize the science that we were doing into the lab. So I enrolled at the Sloan in the Biomedical Enterprise Program, and I audited that every class that HBS was looking for scientists to join their interdisciplinary team. And it was very good for me to see how much scientists were sick into the HBS classes, because they really wanted to have the perspective of the founders and the people that they will come up with the idea. So what my fit there, trying to see if I really liked the commercializing science aspect, and I really fall in love with that approach. And so towards the end of my postdoc, I decided I was sitting on this data as one of my side projects, and decided to, kind of more as an exercise and see if I was going to apply all of the things learned at the business school into one of my products, what will come out of it. So I put the business plan for what now is PanTher and applied to the MIT 100K. And from there, kind of, we moved along into the translation from the academic aspect to the company. And we are doing localized drug delivery to change the way that solid tumors are treated so that we can decrease the side effect and enhance therapeutic efficacy.
Great. And Dan?
Great, thanks, Steve. All set. So yeah, thanks very much. It's great to be here. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Gro Biosciences, which is a company built around really the first in vivo platform for scalable expression of proteins with non-standard amino acids. So really trying to go beyond the 20 standard amino acids for the first time. I was originally trained in machine learning and AI out at Stanford, and ultimately got into a PhD program at UCSF in the field of computational protein design, where we're really trying to modify the dynamics and structures of proteins using computer algorithms to create new functions. And as a designer, one of the things you're often struck by is the limitations around only having these 20 building blocks to work with. So when I went out and did my postdoc here in Boston with George Church over at Harvard Med, they were just finishing these new organisms, which we call genomically recoded organisms, or GROWs for short, which is the acronym around which our company's name is based, which really let us go beyond those 20 standard amino acids. And I did a 6-year postdoc with George when we did some cool projects that really demonstrated for the first time that we could rationally engineer proteins with new functions that depend critically upon this expanded amino acid alphabet. And so we turned our attention to the question of what are some outstanding problems in protein therapeutics we can address using this technology. And that was really the genesis of Gro Bio. So I'll leave it there, and I think we'll have time to sort of get more into the companies.
Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe actually, Dan, we'll stick with you, because kind of finishing on that story, I think one of the hardest things that we all face in building companies is that moment where we actually believe we have a company to build, right? We go from great science, all of you are great, academic careers, so Dan, maybe just kind of finish that story. When did that light bulb go off in your head about it's time to think about building a company?
Yeah, so scientifically, this happened when we looked at the therapeutic protein landscape and recognized that there was a weak link, so to speak, in a lot of therapeutic proteins that was stabilized by a particular kind of bond. And we've been thinking about non-standard amino acids that could basically replace this bond with a stronger one. And that this could be a general solution to creating therapeutics with prolongated half-lives that could perhaps reduce dosing schedule or improve safety and pharmacokinetics. And while doing this work, another scientist out at UT Austin, Andrew Ellington, which is another leading synthetic biologist, had a postdoc in his lab named Ross Thayer, who published a paper using our platform, using the genomically recoded organism platform to install a particular new amino acid that can form a bond, which happens to be in many ways, ideal replacement for the bond we were trying to strengthen. And so we reached out to Andrew Ellington and Ross Thayer, told them about our intentions to start a company, really. But wanted to see if there was opportunities to both collaborate and then to commercialize. It was actually happened to be on April 1st, I remember. Thankfully, they took us seriously. And they were on board. And so we ended up creating a joint institutional agreement between Harvard and UT Austin, which does sort of play into the tech transfer story as well. But so the co-founding group ended up coming out of both Harvard and UT. And so we then had in our hands the technology we needed, combining both the organism and the new amino acid chemistry and the associated translational machinery to get going. And with a little bit of help from the OTD, who was able to do some sort of preliminary market assessment with us and give us some early introductions to potential pharma partners, we had what we needed to start going out and raising capital, which I did throughout the 2016-2017 year. It took about a full year to raise the first seed capital. And then we started in earnest at the Harvard Life Lab in 2017, August 2017.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, it's always interesting how kind of the serendipity of, another inventor, following on is always great. Maybe Jessica, could you tell us a little bit more about Accure and what was the genesis of deciding that this was the company that you needed to build?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'll thank you for giving me the opportunity to finish my longer, version of my story. Yeah, so when I was in graduate school, my PI started several companies, and I thought that was really cool, and I was curious, but I never really thought that I was going to start one like on my own. So then I moved to Genentech, and I was very much into new technology development, and I thought that I knew a lot about cancer until my mom got cancer. So I got really frustrated because I didn't really know how to help her. So I think around that time, I talked with many clinicians and scientists, and I realized that many of the technology, actually most of the technologies that I was working on I knew of, they were not really available to the doctors or to the patients. So I think that's actually sort of motivated me to start a company, because we want to really bring those technologies to the clinic faster. So I guess, unfortunately, my mom didn't really live long enough to see this happen, but we were hoping that, we could help some other people. So we started a company, Accure Health, I think a couple of months after my mom passed away. And we're trying to build an integrated solution that can rapidly transform molecular data into actionable information for managing cancer and other diseases at the point of care, and to essentially empower physicians and patients with real-time information when it matters most. So I think that's really sort of my story to start Accure Health.
Well, sorry to hear about your mother, but what a personal journey, right? And I think that's what I always kind of think about biotech that makes what we do very different than, trying to come up with the next Uber, right? Is I think we are solving, amazing problems that face the world. And it's a lot of our passion that becomes part of the DNA and part of the culture of the companies that we build. And I can see how as you lead that company, that's probably an important aspect of what gets everybody in your company every day thinking about what we need to deliver. So Laura, maybe share a little bit more from your perspective, obviously, of thinking, you start doing these paper exercises, right? And wow, that was an interesting experience, but when it becomes real, tell us that part of the story for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there is always that personal interaction on how people, decide to take that leap of faith and go into creating a company that has the data. So as I was doing that exercise, we got a very good feedback from the community. So we were sitting on a lot of very good data that showed that we can really transform the type of work that we can do for cancer by minimizing the side effects, but it was also mostly being just an academic project. And when we did the 100K, then we realized that it was also a very good business opportunity. And there was a quote from Josh Wolfe is managing partner at LabCentral, and I was looking at one of his interview, and he was saying that entrepreneurs usually they look for a job when they don't find a job in the market, that they create a job when they cannot find a job in the market that fits their expectation and their innovation. So that's a little bit how we ended up working, because I had an offer from Abbott to join their drug delivery unit in California. And I found that job very good, but not as stimulating and challenging in changing the therapeutics for patients. Like, it was an incremental benefit of a technology that was already on the market. It was not a disruptive enough technology. And so from there, we kind of sit around the table with our co-founder at MGH and MIT and put together all of the feedback from the business community that we got through the 100K, and decided that we really had something up our sleeves that could change the way cancer is treated. And it also, for me, links to personal story and personal journey of both my mom and my dad going through cancer. So there was that need of seeing a niche of unmet need into the clinical care and deciding to target to bring a solution. So we kind of decided that it was the right time for us to do it. And we started more as avalanche from there. It was a little thing, and
like
then
that.
it was
Yeah,
me
going,
running
right?
in front of an avalanche, trying not to be killed with the things that we put in motion. So
yeah, no, it's always interesting that once you make that decision, how an avalanche, or I described it as a snowball rolling downhill, right? You start gaining momentum, and because of your passion, that kind of it really captures people's imagination, and things just build from there, right? And I think also one of the challenges you always have in building a company is imagining, in many regards, you would love to know all of the answers, but of course, in building any company, you can't know all of the answers, and especially in life sciences companies, you can never know all of the answers. So you have to kind of take that leap of faith to really move forward, not knowing all those answers and just having the confidence that you'll figure it out, which ties to actually kind of my next question I'd love to dig in, and is to think a little bit and reflect. All of us on this call are first time CEOs, although I guess now I'm a washed up CEO or whatever you'd call me now. But we all had to have that moment where we knew the ideas and the business plans and everything looked good. That's one big step, but it's an even bigger step, I think, from a personal level. And many of those that are on the phone may be thinking about these ideas, or maybe in the same boat as you, about making that personal journey that, you're really going to step in and lead the organization. And I think, Laura, I very much felt in building Forma that I did it while I was at a venture fund, which was nice. And I kind of joked it was kind of a cushy way to start a company. But if you were going to lead, you had to lead as the CEO and the founder of the company, not as the chairman of the board or whatever, kind of advising the company, right? So there is that lead from the front. And I think that's how great companies are built. So maybe we could flip back. Maybe we'll start this time with Jessica, but, tell us a little bit, you touched on what motivated you to do it, but can you give the listeners a little bit more insights into, kind of the personal journey of becoming a first-time CEO?
Yeah, so for me, it was actually, really straightforward, because I guess, I started a company, and then among the 4 co-founders, there were 2, professors full time, and then there was another engineers who just doesn't really want to speak to other people most of the times. So we looked at each other and was like, maybe I could be the CEO and to lead. So I think that was like a very there was no objective.
Process of elimination.
I think for many of the probably startups, we would probably have a very similar sort of very humble start in the beginning. But I think we're doing okay. At least we got accepted to the lab, to LabCentral, to be invited to this panel. So that shows we're doing okay. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, with building companies, it always is one day at a time, and you're never out of that feeling like you've got it, and that's kind of what makes it special. Dan, maybe you could share a little of yours, and then Laura, I'd love to kind of hear your personal side of that, and then maybe we could actually come back and we'll touch a little bit on one topic is how does the ecosystem you're in help you in this environment as CEOs as well on a personal level, because I think that's something I never had the benefit of that you guys all do. But Dan, maybe we'll jump to yours and then to Laura.
Yeah, sure. So I'd say about halfway through my postdoc, I was probably 50-50 on if I wanted to pursue an academic career or pursue a startup. And that was also sort of before we had made this sort of link between our platform and this particular new chemistry we kind of stumbled onto. For me, when people ask this question, I assume a number of people on the call might be academics considering taking this route. And for me, I often say that the decision for me came down to what sort of daily nonsense do you like more? I mean, it's not so much about do you want to be a tenured professor or do you want to have a successful startup, because both of the probability of success is always low, to be honest. And so it's really about what day-to-day minutia gets you going more. And so, what is your attraction to teaching? What is your attraction to how much aversion do you have to grant writing, being on academic committees? I definitely felt like I preferred to pitch rather than write grants. And then I found out that my job actually is doing both. So you can't actually get away from that, it turns out. But I just felt that naturally more inclined to a lot of the aspects of the way this work gets done. and how you spend most of your time, which is not the glamorous stuff, and not that there's much glamour anyway, but you got to look at like how you spend 99% of your time. And for me, that really nudged me in this direction. I feel quite confident that it was the right choice. You have to let go of some things, but you can find ways to work them in. I mean, for me, I enjoyed the little bit of teaching I did, but I was never like, I jump right in and just get up in front and start teaching well. It was always like, you know, it took some extra effort to be decent at it. But mentoring is something I love, and I was worried I would lose that. And it turns out you can still do that in biotech, and there's a lot of opportunity for that. So I guess in the end, you sort of, you know, pick the direction that where you're spending most of your time is kind of close to your natural inclination, and then you can find ways to recapture some of what you've given up. And then the one other thing I would talk about is tolerance for risk, because you're really kind of on the edge of a knife at all times in this world, and I think both of our other panelists would agree. And so it's something that I think that kind of comes naturally or not. I'm not sure how easy it is to develop risk tolerance, but I like to describe my fellow entrepreneurs as being fellow delusional optimists for the most part. I mean, we kind of turned a blind eye to the odds. Obviously, you can't be unrealistic, but we all both have to accept the fact that the odds are low we'll succeed, and simultaneously absolutely certain we're going to succeed. And that's really the only way that this works. And so it is a form of delusion. And I think if you have that phenotype, it's helpful.
Yeah, no, my favorite saying when I get asked what's the most important skill of a CEO is to say the irrational belief that you will succeed against all odds is my favorite way to answer that question. So I think you really nailed it on the head. I also like the point you made around, you know, look, you have to understand how you spend your time. And the way I've kind of couched that answer when people ask me for advice about, you know, following a path or not, is I ask the question, where do you get your energy from, right? You know, at the end of the day, if you had to pitch 6 venture capitalists in a day, do you leave that day energized or exhausted, right? Preparing to teach a class, does it inspire you or whatever? And it's always great to be in an environment where you can succeed because you're excited. You derive excitement and energy from it, and that's what's kind of interesting. Actually, was one story coming out the other side, right? You know, as I was thinking about what was next for Forma, you know, I realized that for me, I love the startup, right? And Forma was 150 people, multiple clinical programs. You know, it started to, it was great to see those success, to see these drugs impact and benefit patients. But for me, it was, I really missed the early stage. And so that's always what, I used to always say about LabCentral was coming over to LabCentral for a coffee or an event was something that always, kind of reminded me why I did what I did. And it kind of reminded me what I wanted to get back to doing and recognizing, handing the torch to, in this case, Frank Lee. He had the skill sets, he had the aptitude, he had the ability to think about the next 10-year growth period of Forma. And so you also need practicality of when is it not quite in that. So Laura, maybe over to you and to share a little bit your personal thoughts as you embarked on this journey. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I echo exactly, what Dan and you were saying in terms of, I come from a family of lawyers, so I kind of got that early on into my career development. Like I decided to do what really made me happy, even though it was not what people around me were doing. So, and my dad always told me, you're going to work 90% of your time. So you need to do something that really likes and passionate about. And so becoming the CEO, to me, was not much of a question around that, a little bit like Jessica. It was, that were the people that we were around the table, and I took the lead and decided to, kind of being the captain of this ship and see how we went. And then it came the question, do I know what I'm doing? Like, am I doing the right things? And I think part of that uncertainty is to start to realize you don't know what you don't know. And the best way to cover that is to talk to people. And so I really try and took the most advantage of the ecosystem. Like I applied several times to all of the different accelerator and incubator space. So we were doing Mass Challenge, we did Mass Connect. I am part of Springboard, and that kind of gave me the opportunity to talk about our vision of the company, and at the same time learning all of the things, all of the blind spot and all of the soft skills that a CEO needs to have other than the scientific and the business one. You need to learn how to hire, how to fire, how to, how to create your team, how to fundraise. So I think that I don't know if I will be the perfect person for the long run of the company. As you say, if things becomes bigger, maybe I will not like that. It will not energize me as much. But for the past 4 years, I had a wonderful time. And I had a wonderful time wearing so many different hats. Like that's part of the personal journey that I really enjoyed it. And that makes me know I did it right. I took the right decision by not going to Abbott and deciding what at the time was a crazy decision to
it's
something
I don't think anyone ever regrets kind of the decision once they've made it, irrespective of the risk. And so actually time's flying. This is great talking to everybody, and hopefully everyone online is enjoying this conversation. We will start taking Q&A in a little bit. So if you could start thinking about some of your questions, but maybe what we can do, we have about 5 minutes before we'll go into Q&A, is just talk about, great. So now you've got the company, you've made that big leap of faith into this. What are some of the challenges? Has COVID affected you? What are some of the challenges, pivots that you've had to make in, kind of real time as your company's grown? And then, I have lots of questions that I can't wait to ask the panelists, but if we get some online, we'll start working those in as well. So maybe Jessica, you want to start with that?
Yeah, of course. So, in our case, as I mentioned, we're building a platform technology for digital diagnostics. So I think, the great thing about platform technology is it has a potential for many applications. And the problem of the platform technology is a potential for many applications. So which one are you focusing on, right? So I think,
good news and bad news.
Yeah. So as a first-time entrepreneur, it was very tempting for us to actually focus on something in the beginning based on our own expertise or personal journey or experience. I think it's great, as we already discussed. I mean, it's great to have a passion for something, but sometimes I think the business decision needs to be made based on, the clinical needs, the data or the feedback. So I think something that we did really well in the beginning, this is very similar to what Laura was mentioning, is we really listened to people's feedback, especially, the senior people, the people who had done this before, and we listened. And instead of like jumping into one, application in the very beginning, we spent lots of time really trying to focus on building a very solid foundation. So, we are optimizing our automation device, our data algorithm, our assays, and everything. So once you have a solid foundation, it becomes easier and allowed us to actually validate multiple applications, in collaboration with pharma, with clinicians. And when COVID hit us, it took us like a matter of days or weeks to actually kind of adapt the technology to develop a solution for COVID. And I think that is what I have learned in the past probably 2 or 3 years is to build a really solid foundation, and it became easier later on to focus and when necessary to pivot.
That's great. That's neat to see kind of the pivot. Yeah, COVID creates a lot of opportunities. Maybe Laura, tell us a little bit about how your business strategy has evolved, and then Dan real quick, and then we've started to get some great questions in. So I'll start taking some questions from the audience as well. But Laura, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so for us, it was very similar to Jessica. I think that one of the biggest pivots for us, we are also platform technology. And if I look back at the first time I pitched as we were doing our seed round, it was a very technical question, very technical pitch. We had 5 different programs that we were thinking to run in parallel. And so that idea of focusing was something that we really needed to adapt very fast, but also hiring, like finding the right people to join your team that have skill set that they complement what we were missing. And that was something we needed to adapt to, because at the beginning, it's very easy to evaluate people that are very similar to you. So then, I was very good at finding scientists. I was very good at kind of getting people with the same skill set than I do, but then I needed to pivot it and trying to find complementary skill set. And also the ability of changing very fast. That's something we have always had from the beginning. And I think that the environment at this point has been very helpful with COVID. Like being used to change your plan overnight, basically. We have been at LabCentral since inception. So our time to residency was ending, and we had an alternative labs where we were moving in. And then COVID happened, and that opportunity went away because everybody's restructuring their own lab space. And so we needed, we had the issue to solve of where are we going to go. And luckily we have been, being able to stay at LabCentral for a little bit longer until we find our next opportunity is one of the things that we were prepared to deal with even before COVID happened. Yeah, because we needed to change overnight. And so that ability of flexibility and being able to take from the microenvironment support, that has been very important for us.
Yeah, and you touched on one question actually that had kind of popped up, which was how do we think about recruiting talent? And I think that skill set of, kind of thinking about yourself as the middle piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and you need to fill in the skill sets around you as opposed to thinking about printing more puzzles like you. Dan, pivots in how you thought about your strategy. We've touched on a little bit of COVID and kind of the importance of flexibility and how you think about your trajectory. Thoughts from your side on that, and also maybe we can touch a little bit more on the recruiting and what makes that successful, and is it harder in this kind of environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Laura and Jessica, we have a platform technology as well. And we kind of think about our technology as a 3-layer stack. So the platform or bottom is those organisms that let us put in the new amino acids. And then we have that middle layer, which is the chemistry layer where we, really the world of new amino acids we've added. So when we started the company, we had that sort of one new chemistry that we had found out at UT Austin. And so we initially were kind of running around with a hammer looking for a nail. What is the best therapeutic that needs to have its half-life prolongated, for example? And a lot of that comes down to, I think, as scientists, CEOs, I think I'll speak for myself here, but I think it's not uncommon for us to underestimate the need for customer discovery and business development. And that was something that we learned was so important. Really, a lot of us go out and think, hey, this is great. This is a great idea. This is a great product. Someone's going to want it. And it's not until you do dozens or even hundreds of conversations that you really know that this isn't a problem. This is the problem. And so we have now sort of funneled those efforts into it. I think a really attractive candidate in the diabetes space. But this was really a process of finding the right clinical need for this chemistry. What's shifting now is, as we're moving into the next phase of the company, is we're taking a much broader sort of top-down approach to saying, let's take the space of really outstanding clinical problems, which is no solution on the horizon, and the space of non-standard amino acid chemistries, and then really trying to find the best possible pairings where this is a holy grail problem for which there's not really another obvious solution. And that's been really fun. And a very different way to think about this, because you can sort of start with that customer process, start with the problem, and then get creative around the chemistries and how you'll actually design the proteins. And so that's as we're moving into sort of what we're calling the Series A phase of the company. And I'll quickly mention we're raising our Series A right now. So I don't know if our investors on
many people will be lining up. But yeah, you touched on an important point, and someone had asked the question around, how do you think about going from research to kind of the business development? I think the point you raised that how you think about this, and this is also something that's great about LabCentral, right? We have most of the big pharmas as sponsors. Many of them have office hours and come to events and everything else. And back to the mentoring point you raised earlier, what I love, what they love is being involved in early stage startups. Maybe it grows into something that they can find a partnership down the road, but they're happy to provide their expertise. And so getting that sense, because a good example of you solve a problem that you think is real, but maybe you don't appreciate the clinical it takes you 3 years to prove that out clinically, that could be very, very different than something you could prove out in, a handful of patients early in clinical development is a wildly different outcome, right? So trying to get that input, and again, something that's great about LabCentral is having, 70 other CEOs around you, many of whom maybe spent 30 years in big pharma and maybe, were the heads of diabetes franchise or whatever, right? So it's amazing what resources you can kind of find in that. I wanted to jump to one question and kind of pivot the conversation a little bit towards, leading organizations. So the great thing is LabCentral stayed open through COVID, and many of our webinars have kind of focused in on some of the challenges directly. But one of the things is, and each of you have told such a great passion about how you lead your companies from such a personal level. So how do you really make sure, as people are, working within the COVID restrictions, how do you lead from the front in that environment? How do you make sure that everybody's aligned with the vision and, keep the trains running on time that was maybe so easy when you were all piled in an office together that we're not anymore? Who wants to take that one first?
I can go.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So basically, it has been a change. Like there has been a change in adapting from being able to have team meetings all together into the same room and kind of maintaining the conversation active to now all working remote and, many with kids at home, where it becomes more problematic to have a set schedule. So I think that that ties a little bit on how you hire the people, because what I was very worried at the beginning, because I am a very person, so I needed to have the in-person meetings, and I was worried that not being able to have that was going to make people work less or having less focus. Surprisingly to me, we got more stuff done at different odd hours, like, the fact we didn't have any more than 9 to 5, it was more of a flexible arrangement. But if you have people that are motivated, they will stick around. If you put everything on your boat then and you pick the right people, they will stay with you even in the tough time. And we have been able to progress faster. Obviously, there are some of the ongoing lab experiments that have been delayed because of inability to access the space. But we have been writing paper, we have been writing grants, we have been started conversation with the CROs. We are planning to do a clinical trial in Australia. So we have been able to do other things. And that come a lot from the creativity also of the employee.
I think if you build the right culture, you can weather anything. Jessica, thoughts from your side on this challenge?
Yeah, so totally echoing what Laura is saying. So, what I have from some other people's, sort of recommendations is when you hire people who learn really fast and who communicate really well. So I think in this sort of, times of uncertainties, communication becomes really important. And, our team, we just, we do more actually Zoom meetings than we used to do when we were having in-person, communications. And that really improved our productivity. So same with Laura, we did more than we used to, like before the pandemic, just because we don't need to spend more time on commute anymore. It was just like there's a lot of time, just like sort of like, really freeing. And then the same actually like with some of our collaborators in the pharma side, it's really hard to get meetings with them like before. And now everyone was like, staying at home. So I think the productivity was actually was higher, I think for the past 2 or 3 months, but we're still looking forward, I guess, to getting back to more normal. But I feel like, as long as you have a great team, you communicate effectively, you have people who are really motivated, that actually will be the key to addressing this.
If they're aligned with the vision, I think the rest falls in line, right? So if you hire people that can execute on that, they're going to run through walls in this. Dan, thoughts from your side on kind of how to deal with some of this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's really striking nobody wants to, but if you think back to March, just how much uncertainty there was. I mean, is the world ending? The markets are collapsing. Are we all going to be perishing from this illness? And how do you even catch it? What is the right level of risk to assume? How do we assess that risk? And so, it was extraordinarily difficult to think about, how to run a company in this climate. So really the first thing we did was we met with everybody and tried to provide a realistic but transparent assessment of where we stood and sort of how we were going to navigate this process together. We were actually very, I think, open with the team about our cash position, because people were feeling so much stress. We didn't want to be unrealistic. We didn't want to also have them wondering if I'm going to lose my job today or tomorrow. And so in our case, we were fortunate that our position was okay, and we could tell them they're going to have jobs for a significant period of time. But we really tried to be open about it and let them know where things stood. And then so the CSO and I then had one-on-one meetings with each person. We're a 9-person company, so quite small, and try to get a sense for their personal concerns, their capacity for work, their responsibilities at home. Some of them were caring for sick loved ones, and then try to take all that information and build a new operational plan. And the feedback we got ran, not surprisingly, across the entire spectrum from "I'll be anywhere you want me and work as much as you want" to "I question, should we be working at all right now?" And so we were able to basically take all this and put it together and have a new plan that sort of, and this is not uncommon, basically break people into teams. As you said, Steve, LabCentral stayed open, and we never knew we'd be open tomorrow or a week from now or whatever, but they did a terrific job here, allowing sort of basic activities to proceed and keeping us safe. We haven't had a single documented COVID case either. And then ultimately we settle on this sort of 50% occupancy in the lab plan with daily handoffs. And that's been working. And we've actually been, I think, more productive than we expected. Most of that credit goes to the team for adjusting. And also, as I think Jessica and Laura alluded to, is the communication. We had to really take time to get communication protocols in place for handing off these experiments, because
that's a great point. Shift work requires a very different thing when somebody else is finishing your experiment, right?
That's right. And a lot of people, the way they do lab work, there's a lot of little things they don't necessarily put into the write-up, right? And those little things make all the difference. So a lot of it was the communication and the handoffs. And I guess one other thing I'll mention is financing. And I think probably everybody has strong feelings about this. I mean, obviously in March, we wondered if the capital markets would be closed for 18 months or what. Yeah. And it turns out they're not. And it's possible to raise money during COVID, which is, I think, a bit of a shock. In some way, it speaks to market
and the IPO market's roaring. So it's been amazing to see. I think in some regards, maybe a reflection of, for once, our industry is getting the proper recognition for the value that we can create, right? And companies are pivoting into COVID or leveraging that. So yeah, that's great. We actually only have we have 3 minutes left. So what I'd love to end with is just a one-liner. You're meeting with a young entrepreneur. You want to give them one piece of advice that maybe you wish someone had given to you when you started. So if we can end on that, I think it's a great way to always end. So anyone want to go first? Because maybe you need a second to think about it. But
well, I'm still unmuted, so I'll just. I'll
Sounds great. Roll with it.
And I think I just repeat my comment from earlier about customer discovery, which really comes back to the question of is there a product there, and who is the customer? Because I think it's something that as scientists we're used to, this world of putting together a cool paper and getting it out the door, and it gets accepted because it's novel or interesting or elucidates something unknown. And it's just a very different goal in this world. And it's very, I think, easy to lose, or it takes time to learn what actually is the right metric to be pursuing. And a lot that only comes from having lots and lots of conversations with prospective customers. And so I would hammer that home to do that as early as possible when you're considering taking something away from academia.
Sounds terrific. Let's see, Jessica, why don't you go next?
Yeah. So I think I actually have two small pieces of advices. One is from myself, and the other one is from someone I look up to. So the first one is, from Eric James, so the new dean of the Wharton Business School of the University of Pennsylvania. So she's actually just become the first female dean of Wharton in 130 years of history of this school.
About time.
So she's a 30 job actually in the pandemic, on July 1st. And Good Morning America did the interview and asked her for advice. So she said to the students and fellow entrepreneurs to always bet on yourself. especially in times of uncertainty and crisis. I think this is great advice for almost everyone, but I think particularly for female entrepreneurs. And I think, to always bet on ourselves. But I want to add a little bit more of my own flavor. So mine would be to accept help from other people. So together, I think my advice would be to always bet on yourself and to accept help from other people.
Oh, that's great. Perfect. Laura, this is great.
So for me, I think, again, a couple of points. One is talk with everybody and listen to everybody and then make your own decision. Like that you will, especially if you're doing something innovative, there will be people that are trying to tell you to do things as they've always done. And so then it's up to you to decide which comments to take and not, but you cannot make a decision if you don't know all of the story. So go out there, talk with everybody, ask questions, ask for help, because you rarely get help if you don't ask for.
That's
surprisingly true. But they cannot read into your mind of what you're looking for. So go out and ask, and then do your internal screening to see what it is and what it doesn't work for you, for your vision of the company and for how you want to lead. I think that at some point last year, Stat did a piece on us, and they started saying every time that there was a stage, Laura was there talking. Like they saw me so many times that then they needed to put it there. And it is true. Like I try and get the networking so expand your network as much as you can, because you never know how and when they can be helpful. And people really want to be helpful. Like people really want to go out and talk about what they're doing and to help other people. So that's one piece of advice. And the second little one is perseverance. Like things will look bad more times per day, and you will want to give up. And so I think being perseverant in what you are doing, really believing and going forward without
and knowing others are in that same boat as you.
Yes,
is always important.
And that's very helpful in the talking, because something that for me was very bad at the beginning, I thought I was the only one feeling that way. Yeah. I thought that all of the other CEO, they knew what they were doing, they had a very clear plan, and then I was the one left behind. And reality is that we are all in the same boat.
We are all.
It is good to say it out, like we are all there.
Well, great. Thank you all. This has been an amazing time. I wish I all had a chance to get that advice from all of you when I was starting Forma, and hopefully those on the phone will take that inspiration. I echo everything that was said. I think that was really great. So again, I'd just like to thank Laura, Dan, and Jessica one more time for a great panel. They're obviously great examples of phenomenal first-time CEOs, great advocates of what the amazing things that LabCentral can do. And I hope you'll all join us next time. So next week we'll be focused in on oncology. So that'll be Tuesday, July 21st. So I hope all of you can join us then. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Bye.